Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Tisa Canady, founder and executive director of the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our fourth annual virtual symposium. The title of the symposium is always the same, Advancing Collegiate Financial Wellness as an Essential Ingredient for Student Success. But we know that there's much work to do, so we have a lot of topics that we're going to cover today with a robust agenda to help our campus-based professionals and community partners learn, share, and grow their financial wellness initiatives on their campuses and at their respective organizations. Since we have such a robust agenda, I want to get right into it and introduce our first guest, Maryland's Comptroller, Brooke Lierman. Brooke Lierman is the 34th Comptroller of the state of Maryland and the first woman to be independently elected to one of our state's constitutional offices. After running a strong, policy-focused, and grassroots-led two-year campaign, she was elected with over 60% of the vote in November of 2022. She's an attorney by training, practicing as a civil rights and disability rights lawyer for many years. And prior to her election as the comptroller, she served for 8 years as a member of the House of Delegates representing part of Baltimore City. While in the House, she spent time in leadership roles on both the Appropriations Committee and the Environment and Transportation Committee. Additionally, she was the House Chair for the Joint Committee on Pensions, sat on the Joint Committee on Ending Homelessness, and founded the Maryland Transit Caucus. Brooke Lierman successfully passed landmark legislation to invest in and improve public transit and public schools, end suspension and expulsion for young students, fund evidence-based gun violence prevention programs and sex trafficking victims, close loopholes in affordable housing laws, and create the Office of Statewide Broadband. As comptroller, she is dedicated to creating a Maryland that is more equitable, more resilient, and more prosperous, so that all Marylanders can reach their full potential. She and her husband and 2 school-aged children live in Baltimore City, and it's my pleasure to welcome Comptroller Brooke Lierman here today.
Well, thank you so much for that very generous introduction, Dr. Canady. It's wonderful to be here with all of you, and congratulations on what looks to be another amazing symposium with people from all over and incredible speakers. So I wish I could spend the whole day with you, but I'm just delighted to be here first thing in the morning to welcome everybody. As you said, good morning, everybody. I'm Brooke Lierman. I'm honored to serve as the 34th Comptroller of the state of Maryland and the first woman to hold this position. Little bit about me. I was raised in Montgomery County, proud graduate of Maryland Public Schools, and mom of 2 Baltimore City public school students now. I'm an attorney by trade. I was a civil rights and disability rights attorney for many years. And prior to becoming comptroller, as you said, I was a 2-term state delegate from Baltimore. Now, about 15 or 16 months into my term as comptroller, we are so focused as an agency on a new vision that we set out for ourselves that ties in so well with the work that you all are doing. We are committed to working in partnership to create a state that's more equitable, more resilient, and more prosperous so that every Marylander can reach their full potential. And partners there, that word partnership is just key. And that's why I'm here today, because of the work that you are doing recognizes that when we build financial equity, when we build resilience, when we build prosperity, that is all a result of hopefully building financial education and financial literacy. We can't do one without the other. So I'm thrilled to be here with all of you. We know that more than 849,000 student loan borrowers live in Maryland. That's about 14% of our state's population. 49% of those borrowers are under the age of 35, and the average student loan debt is around $42,000, which is the highest of every state except for DC. The college search, figuring out. I'm so grateful that the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness and professionals like all of the folks here are really there to guide Maryland students and their families during such an important time. You are key partners to ensuring that college students and their families make informed decisions during the entire process and all 4 years and thereafter. It's really setting up people for a lifetime of financial awareness and success. College, of course, is a tool for economic mobility and prosperity, but it's also a high cost, and cost can be seen as a barrier to many things, including, of course, once you have that loan debt, making it harder sometimes to buy a home, start a family, think about even affording childcare, which is so high in this state right now. And I know, you know that college costs have ballooned over the last 30 years as housing interest rates and prices have climbed. So we know that there are challenges out there. The question is, are we prepared to meet those challenges and to overcome them? So the Office of the Comptroller really works to support Marylanders in their college and financial journey in a number of different ways. First, we process all the tax credits that put money in the pockets and bank accounts of Marylanders, including, of course, the student loan tax credit, the student loan debt relief tax credit. And that is for all eligible residents, making undergrad or graduate student loan payments. It's administered by the Maryland Higher Education Commission, but we ultimately are responsible for getting the money out. And in fact, we've awarded more than 58,000 income tax credits worth more than $67 million in the last 7 years of the program. Today, during your last general session, you'll also hear from Nicole Johnson, who's one of our public engagement officers with the Office of the Comptroller. When I became the Comptroller, we set out a new vision, but we also set out a number of core priorities for our agency to make sure that we were doing the work that Marylanders needed us to do. I serve really as the elected CFO of the state, overseeing all revenue administration, making sure that we're accurately forecasting our revenues so that we can build a budget, so that the governor and the General Assembly can build a budget for our state. I also serve on the Board of Public Works, which is the body responsible for overseeing contracting and procurement in the state of Maryland. And I'm the vice chair of our State Retirement and Pension Board, in addition to a number of other things. But when we really looked at what our office should be doing, one of the key things we realized it needed to do was to share the resources and the expertise of our agency with Marylanders. And a big piece of that was creating a public engagement team. Nicole is one of our public engagement officers. She has a geographic focus, but she also has a subject matter focus because we know that financial literacy and financial education is such an important part of building a strong and prosperous Maryland. She's devoted to working with our partners like the Cash Campaign and like others around the state and leading our Financial Literacy Advisory Council, which is one of our 10 advisory councils and work groups, to make sure that we're thinking about how our agency can partner with groups like yours and people around the state to increase the financial literacy and financial well-being of all Marylanders. I'll just close by saying, Maryland's 55 colleges and universities are an incredible asset to our state. They draw investments for research and cutting-edge programs. They attract students who fall in love with Maryland, choose to stay after graduation, and contribute to our workforce and our thriving communities. My philosophy really boils down to, we all do better when we all do better. And that means making sure that we're partnering together to empower ourselves and the next generation on money and finances. So please visit our website, marylandtaxes.gov. You can find our research reports at marylandtaxes.gov/research. And we're looking forward to next year when we launch a webpage devoted to financial education and literacy as well. So thank you so much for having me today. Good luck and have fun on the symposium today. Thank you for all you do. And I look forward to working together with you to create a better Maryland. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Comptroller Lierman. Before you go, I want to thank you on behalf of every Marylander who has received that student debt relief tax credit, self-included. I appreciate you for making that happen. It's very helpful for those of us who have student loans, and we want to make sure that everyone is aware of all the resources that Maryland has to offer through the Office of the Comptroller, so that we can all be more financially capable. At this time, I would like to turn things over to our next speaker, who is Dr. Sanjay Rai. He is no stranger to this higher education space. We've known him before from Montgomery College, one of the colleges that we've worked with extensively. And I just want to say that Dr. Rai has given us his ear since we began this journey and since he joined the Maryland Higher Education Commission. He has more than 30 years of experience in higher education as a faculty member, a scholar, and a leader. He is an award-winning educator recognized for his excellence in teaching, and he has committed himself to increasing access and student success, as well as closing achievement gaps. Earlier this year, Dr. Rye was officially appointed by Governor Wes Moore as the Secretary of the Maryland Higher Education Commission, and we are so excited to have him here with us today. Welcome, Secretary Rye.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Perfect.
Thank you, Dr. Canady. Good morning, everyone, again. I am enormously humbled and privileged to serve as Secretary of Maryland Higher Education Commission. Very thankful to Governor Moore and Lieutenant Governor Miller for this opportunity. I am a first-generation high school graduate in my family. I grew up in India, and I came to United States to pursue higher education. I earned my doctorate in mathematics, as Tisa mentioned. I was teaching mathematics at various places in the country. Very fortunate to arrive at Montgomery College in Montgomery County, Maryland, 20 years ago as Dean of Mathematics, Science, and Engineering. When it comes to financial barriers, is to access to higher education, that is one of the most significant barriers that students across the country and students in Maryland face. If you look at a student loan, typically a first-generation student, if they took a loan 10 years ago, and they have been paying for the last 10 years, but in spite of that, today, they owe more than what they borrowed 10 years ago. So President Biden's loan forgiveness program was very, very powerful for us to succeed, for us to make sure that every resident in our nation, every resident, every citizen, every member of our community in Maryland to have access to higher education. We would need bold vision, bold priorities, and bold decisions to make a difference in the students' lives. I am so happy that Maryland higher education community has gathered today in support of advancing collegiate financial wellness. I know this is your 4th symposium, but I would like to say that this symposium is probably the most important one, particularly given the critical challenges that we all have faced because of this FAFSA changes and the new software, new technology that help us make so many adjustments over the last 8 months. I want to thank all of you. I want to thank financial aid staff at every single institution of higher education in Maryland. And certainly, I want to thank my own team, Al Dorsett and others, 6 or 7 other people who are involved directly with financial aid processing at Maryland Higher Education Commission. Things kept changing every day, every week, every month, all kinds of challenges, but all of you were focused in making sure that our students are able to complete their FAFSA form and they are able to receive the financial aid that they should receive in order to go to higher education. We were a little behind in completion of FAFSA forms, but we are catching up. We are all working together. College admissions, college enrollments, they're all looking good. I mean, all indications show that our enrollment this fall will be higher than the enrollment last year. And given the special challenges that came this year, I want to again thank all of you. It is because of your work that our enrollment will look good and Marylanders will have access to high quality and affordable higher education within the state of Maryland. As Secretary of Higher Education, I want to make sure that our students do not leave our state to seek higher education and go to other states. You serve as an important cornerstone in the lives of so many students and families who need your guidance and insight in order to navigate the unique complexities of financial aid at various institutions. Maryland Higher Education Commission is certainly proud to partner with organizations like Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness to provide educational stability and a clear path and direction to our students. MHEC has introduced new policies to promote stability and make sure resources are accessible to Maryland students and their families. You will hear about these initiatives in detail today from Dorsett, MHEC's Director of Student Financial Assistance, later in your program. We are making several changes. We want to make sure that resources are available to students, number one, but their ability to and their experience in receiving these resources should be easy, it should be enjoyable. They should not spend all their energy in getting the financial resources. They should keep their energy and excitement for going to colleges, studying there, and having a wonderful learning experiences. In addition to our ongoing work, we hosted the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness at our headquarters in Baltimore City. MCCFW provided direct assistance to employees with student loans who are applying for public service loan forgiveness. This is again a very important program that MHEC administers on behalf of residents in Maryland. Today, you will hear more about MHEC and MCCFW and our shared commitment to achieving student success with less debt. I know you will leave this symposium having learned something new. Hopefully, you can apply this knowledge for the benefit of yourself, your students, and your colleagues. In the end, I want to extend my congratulations to Dr. Tisa Canady and the team at the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness for hosting this very important event. I hope everyone enjoys this symposium. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary Rai. I was taking notes, and I think we might have to take that line about making the process easy, enjoyable, helping students keep that energy and excitement. We like what you did there, and we thank you so much.
Absolutely. You have our commitment for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We are so happy to have you here, and thank you for sharing more about your educational journey and how you got to where you are today. At this time, we'd like to take things to the campus level. Everyone has heard of the University of Maryland, but there are several campuses, including one known as the Shore. And we've had several opportunities to work with the University of Maryland Eastern Shore over the past couple of years. I'm especially pleased today that we're going to be hearing remarks from the university's president, Dr. Heidi Anderson.
Greetings and welcome on behalf of the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 4th Annual Symposium of the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. The theme, Advancing College Wellness as an Essential Ingredient for Student Success, truly speaks to your values about preparing Maryland students for success. Summer is typically the time for vacations, long weekends, and relaxing. But I've always believed we should never stop learning. So I commend you all for being here today in this space for learning, sharing, engaging, and growing. Today's event comes at a time when finances are in the news at the federal, state, institution, and even personal level. Policy change has impacted the FAFSA, student loan repayment, admissions policies, and all of this is requiring us in higher education to adapt quickly and often with limited resources. While headlines promote uncertainty, I want to provide some real and certain encouragement right here from Princess Anne, Maryland. At UMES, we have been working hard to foster stability and success for both our students and for our employees. For students, we are thrilled that last fall marked the 3rd consecutive year of increased enrollment. We continue to welcome new students to the Eastern Shore. And in fact, we're hosting a new Student Hawk Day today. The Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness has had a presence in Freshman Week activities for the past 2 years, helping prepare students for readiness on day one and financial success. For our employees, we formed a collaboration between Financial Aid Office and our Human Resources Office. And our faculty and staff have had the opportunity to engage with the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness on 2 initiatives. One, on the public service loan forgiveness. We held 1 webinar and many individual advising sessions for our employees. And we have already seen a $750,000 in debt relieved in exchange for their years of public service. The education and enrichment we provide for our students and our employees invigorates the surrounding community and contributes to building a better Maryland. When you think about this bigger picture, sometimes you lose sight of your role within it and how your response or outreach to a student could make the difference between a missed meal and nourishment, a nominal unpaid balance and a last dollar scholarship, or a withdrawal and persistence achieved with the combined support of advisors and community resources. Our students are different, but many of their struggles are the same. Today, you will hear about working with different populations, preparing graduates for financial success after college, and growing community partnerships that can change systems from the ground up, all with the goal of advancing collegiate financial wellness. I encourage you to take notes, to engage, to connect and collaborate. It will make a difference. In closing, congratulations to the team at the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness on your 4th symposium, and thank you for all your work with the University of Maryland Eastern Shore.
Wonderful. Again, the University of Maryland Eastern Shore is hosting New Hawk Day today, so we're just extending best wishes to them for success, and also sending those wishes to the students who have chosen to attend UMES in this coming academic year. Now we're going to get into our first session, which is entitled The Pivot to Promote Stability When Things Get Complicated. We all know that federal financial aid is a critical source of funding for higher education. The FAFSA Simplification Act of 2019 has expanded access and eligibility to aid. However, the road to that expansion and simplification presented some traffic, some delays, and to be frank, some outright barriers. Today, we will hear directly from 2 industry insiders about what happened and the strategic steps that have been taken to promote stabilities for students and families, especially in Maryland, while working simultaneously to resolve the challenges. So today, I'm really happy to have with us Jackie Cottom, who is a compliance specialist and webinar producer for the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, and Al Dorsett, who is the director of the Office of Student Financial Assistance at the Maryland Higher Education Commission. And before we get started, I just want to share with everyone that there's some acronyms that you might hear during this conversation. MHEC, Mr. Dorsett has right behind him. That's the Maryland Higher Education Commission. And NASFAA is the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. So, Ms. Cottom and Mr. Dorsett, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's get into our first question. So many of us have heard about the FAFSA this year and this entire process being branded as the FAFSA fiasco. But things are supposed to be better on the other side of this. So my first question is for Ms. Cottom, and that's, can you explain to us the major intended goals of FAFSA simplification in layman's terms? Because many of our guests do not have a background in financial aid.
Of course. And I know we are always, as financial aid administrators, kind of throwing out acronyms and things like that. So I'm going to break it down. I'm going to start with a little history because I know we do have a wide range of individuals here today. So several major student aid policy provisions were included in the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, and that included FAFSA simplification. So it's not unusual for spending bills to include policy items unrelated to the budget. So this one marked a significant and welcome piece of student aid legislation. So the FAFSA Simplification Act was a bipartisan bill introduced, and its aim was to replace the expected family contribution. You may hear us call that the EFC. And that replaced the EFC with the Student Aid Index. It was an acknowledgement that the term EFC, that expected family contribution, doesn't properly characterize what is in fact an actual eligibility index for distributing funds. It wasn't a real reflection on what families were expected to pay. So the FAFSA Simplification Act included changes to the calculation used in need analysis, and need analysis is a system used to allocate limited financial resources to students. So what it did is the goal and that aim was to expand the federal Pell Grant eligibility to make more students have availability to it. It links eligibility to family size and the federal poverty level for more predictability of the federal Pell Grant eligibility, so that you knew ahead of time, who would qualify. Families and students could say like, okay, I may qualify for a maximum Pell Grant. It also simplified the FAFSA by making use of the Department of Education and the IRS with direct data sharing. And that was permitted by the Future Act. It also helps streamline items on the FAFSA. So only, for example, untaxed income items that were on the federal tax return are going to be asked on the FAFSA. So before, there was a lot of untaxed income items that students and parents had to put on the FAFSA that weren't on the tax return. And so it's like, okay, let's make this simple. Let's look at what's on the tax return. Let's pull that data in to make it easier for parents and students to complete the FAFSA. It also, like I said, for that maximum Pell Grant, for example, if you're an independent student and a non-tax filer, automatically you're going to get a maximum Pell Grant. So those were some of the goals and the aims. There's a lot more items that a student will qualify for a maximum Pell Grant. And I won't go into all those details, but for example, one of them is if an independent student is a single parent and their AGI is below 225% of the poverty level, they're eligible for maximum Pell Grant. So it had those provisions in it so that it would just be a lot easier for students and families to know what they can expect to receive and also to expand that Pell Grant.
Okay. So it sounds like there were great intentions, but when things rolled out, that's when, the challenges began. So if you could please give us a bit of an overview of what happened and where we are right now, and then we'll shift over to Mr. Dorsett for the state perspective.
Okay. Well, the good news was that when the FAFSA did become available, it was delayed, and usually in the award year, the FAFSA is available October 1st. So students and families can begin filling that out. That was delayed until the very, very end of December. So we already started late for the FAFSA cycle. The majority, like I said, the good news, many individuals, when they were able to submit the FAFSA, they said that they were able to do it in record amount of time. However, there were many families and students who were unable to submit the FAFSA. Those families that are have mixed status families. So for example, if the parent might be undocumented, but the children are citizens and have social security numbers, those families were unable to complete the FAFSA because they were unable to do the authentication process. There's also submitting the FAFSA is just the first step. Usually when a student submits the FAFSA, the application goes through something we call database matches. So it checks it with Social Security Administration, Department of Homeland Security, Veterans Affairs. So there's all these things that happen in the back end. None of that was happening. Financial aid administrators were told by the Department of Education in November that they can expect to receive that data. We call it an ISER. It's an institutional student information record. So once the student submits the FAFSA in normal years, schools get it in a couple days. Schools can start processing the information. Schools can start letting students know, this is your financial aid offer. This is what you can expect to receive if you attend our institution. Schools were unable to do that. And again, October 1st, schools are usually getting this information. They can push it right out. Department told us in November that we could expect the ISERs in late January, January 30th. They said that it would be delayed to the first half of March. And then in March, we had formula issues and they had to reprocess ISERs. And so it has just been a roller coaster. We felt like we've had whiplash. We've been told, okay, we're going to get this. We've got excited. We've told our college higher education administration, this is what the plan is. And then we are told, oh, wait, this is incorrect data, or we have to update tables. So it has just delayed the process for students and families to receive their aid offers. And we're still not out of the woods yet. One of the other processes when you're completing the FAFSA, we get that information if students have a professional judgment, for example. So this data is from 2 years ago. We're looking at data from 2 years ago. A family may have a job loss or say, you know, this isn't a true reflection of what my circumstances are right now. Financial aid administrators, they can review the application, do adjustments and make those corrections. But they weren't able to do corrections right away. So that process still isn't completely up. So there's just been delay after delay after delay. So like I said, there's good news. The intention of this is that it's going to be simpler and easier for families, but it has been a complicated rollout, to say the least.
Definitely. Now, Mr. Dorsett, I remember back in November, we were at the annual conference for the Delaware, D.C., Maryland Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, and you were giving us all a rundown, you know, what's coming at the state level. Everyone knew FAFSA simplification is coming, and but we didn't know exactly what was going to happen. So I would like for you to walk us through how your plan evolved and what MHEC has done in response to the rollout of this new and improved FAFSA.
Sure. So, as you indicated, in November, we had already identified the FAFSA was going to be available late. There was a new FAFSA coming out. So even before November, we had started a statewide campaign of traveling to key areas within the state and giving financial aid workshops to guidance counselors, nonprofit professionals, other individuals to assist students in completing the FAFSA. And the key push was really getting students and parents to at least create a FSA ID and password. As Ms. Cottom said, complications came with the FAFSA drastically, not only on the side of the FAFSA being late, but the removal of certain pieces or categories within the FAFSA, such as location, where the student would be living, whether on campus, off campus, with parent. And just to give a background, the way that state aid uses the FAFSA, really there's two major programs, which is the Howard P. Rawlings Education Excellence Awards programs that houses the Guaranteed Access Grant as well as the Educational Assistance Grant, and then the Promise Grant. Those are two major big programs that really utilize the FAFSA, and more so the GA beyond anything. That Guaranteed Access Grant, we use the FAFSA, yes, to identify the household size and the family income because GA is not based off SAI eligibility, but more based off a student and family meeting 130% of the federal poverty guidelines based off that year that they're coming in. So when we look at that, we look at that information, and unfortunately, the easiness or simplification of the FAFSA made it difficult in other ways because we realized that individuals that automatically got a negative 1,500 SAI because they said they didn't file taxes, there was no household size for those individuals. They weren't required to answer any other information. In other cases, individuals were not required to put any income information. So, it couldn't read GA eligibility, even though an individual had a negative 1,500 SAI. There was no income provided on that FAFSA. So these were different things that we had to identify. And unfortunately, there's times where you're waiting for something to happen, and then I think we got about 100 different test FAFSAs, and then 2 weeks later it was like, here's the FAFSAs, and here's some updates that need to go with this SAI calculation as well too. So a lot of just different hiccups, obstacles that we ran into, but the push was really to keep all constituents informed. So we had several different open houses where we met with financial aid professionals, we met with legislators, we met with nonprofits, and we met with the public. Just going over where we were at, sending out several different newsletters, identifying complications that we ran into when we had to shut down the system to work out some arrangements or tweak some few pieces. And then working with our constituents, such as the nonprofits, to communicate with students and families, the institutions, to communicate with students and families, to really push out that. So as much as we hit those obstacles, I think we've progressed at this point in time. We've awarded over 15,000 students. Of course, some students chose not to accept their awards. Some awards got canceled for different reasons. So ultimately, we're about 13,000, a little bit over 13,500 students have been awarded for 115 million in the Howard P. Rawlings Education Excellence Awards programs. That GA grant goes up to 22,100. That's where the FAFSA is also utilized as well, because that helps us determine need. As Ms. Cottom indicated, we also identify need. Our formula for need is the cost of attendance at the institution minus the SAI. Of course, negative 1,500 is equivalent to 0, minus the Pell Grant, leaves the remaining need, where a student can receive up to 22,100. So that's where we were really needing the FAFSA to come in, because that housing status really impacted us, where we had to do a supplemental form for students to complete and when they were accepting their awards, that would identify what their award should be. So we awarded every student at the maximum amount initially. And then when they chose their campus and their enrollment and their housing status, their award would adjust to reflect. So if their housing status was on campus, it would stay the same. If their housing status was off campus or home, then it would reduce down to what it should based off that. So really that has been the push, and still communicating with constituents, still awarding as many individuals. We have guaranteed that any individual that has completed the FAFSA by May 15th and submitted all documents, the required documents, but July 15th, we will make sure they get awarded. So we are pushing for that. We're still trying to make sure that students that have completed the FAFSA between May 15th or May 16th and June 1st are awarded as well. But our first priority is any individual that completed that FAFSA by May 15th, as well as we've held off, unfortunately, on awarding any EA initial students, just with recent year or past year legislative changes. The eligibility for the GA has expanded. So that's created a large opportunity for more students to be eligible for the GA.
So I was keeping track of the acronyms: EA, GA,
Yes.
SAI, ISA. And this is a really good conversation to have for the members of our audience who do not work in the financial aid office, because sometimes it's very easy to think, oh, well, just fill out the FAFSA and you'll get some money, when there's so much that goes into the FAFSA. And for the schools, evaluating the information that's on the FAFSA. For you at the state level, Mr. Dorsett, evaluating that information from the FAFSA to determine what types of aid students are eligible for. And this is so important because the aid is gift aid. This is not loans that we're speaking of.
Right.
Also, as both of you were speaking about all of these changes that are going on at the federal level, I kept thinking this sounds a lot like the world of student loans. So we're going to talk about that in the next session. But back to the FAFSA. I'm pleased to hear Secretary Wright announce that enrollment is going to be higher in the state of Maryland this fall, but we know that that's not the case for every state. So at this point, I'd like to ask Ms. Cottom, what have you seen around the nation for FAFSA submission and completion rates, and what does enrollment look like for fall 24?
Well, the National College Attainment Network in CAN, they do have something called a FAFSA tracker. So I pulled up the statistics because I know we are talking a lot about acronyms and what schools are doing, just hard statistics. Through July 12th, 47.2 of the high school class of 2024 has completed a FAFSA, which sounds great. However, that's a negative 10.9% decline compared to the last academic year. So we still have a lot of families that have not even completed the FAFSA. Like I mentioned, there are complications for several families, especially those of mixed status, because they are not able to do the third-party authorization process to even create the FSIID in order to provide consent. With the new FAFSA, all contributors, a contributor is anyone that needs to be put on the FAFSA, so that's parents and students or a spouse. They have to have that FSAID. In the past, you could do a signature page. So if a parent didn't have a social security number, they could just sign and give it to the financial aid office and say, here you go, and they could process it. So we're still having a good number of families unable to submit the FAFSA. Also, those who might have done the paper applications have not been processed yet. So that's another group of FAFSAs that are not currently processed. So that could also result in the lower amount of FAFSAs being completed.
Wow. I didn't know, and this, I'm financial aid adjacent. I always say that, not financial aid. So when you brought up a paper FAFSA, I did not know that the FAFSA was still available via paper. So that's something for those of us who are not in financial aid to hold on to and be reminded that there are some people who actually have to do it going by the paper route.
And part of the part of the FAFSA simplification process, it did expand eligibility for incarcerated students. So that's a population, for example, of students who would primarily use the paper FAFSA just because of access to technology. So, yeah.
So that's the perfect segue into my next question, which is for Mr. Dorsett. This is about MHEC processing and the One app. Please tell us more about the One app, when it was released, and what it allows students and families in Maryland to do.
So the One app is really a answer response to Senate Bill 501, which was passed in 2022, which was looking for MHEC to design a application, and we're still going on pushing towards the bill and designing a new system. But that was really a response to that, to give students a one place to complete the application for all programs. So where we had the Maryland State application, which was really a application for students that were non-citizens, but residents of Maryland to apply for state aid. We wanted to incorporate that into the MHEC One app, as well as an application for all programs. So we opened the MHEC One app along with the FAFSA. Ran into some complications, but not as many as the FAFSA, so that's a good piece right there. But really, that MHEC One app, a student signs in, creates their MD-CAPS account, so it's not an app. It actually stands for one application, just short, one app. But a student creates an MD-CAPS account. Once they create their MD-CAPS account, a student can complete the One app. So if a student is applying for a program such as the Howard P. Rawlings Educational Excellence Awards programs or Promise, and they're eligible to complete a FAFSA, the MHEC One app does not override the FAFSA. They still have to do a FAFSA. However, if a student does the FAFSA and then says, well, I want to apply for the Teaching Fellows or the Cybersecurity Scholarship or one of our other many programs, because we have over 30 programs now, then that student can go on the MHEC One app, identify that they've already completed the FAFSA, and apply for one of the other programs or all of the programs that they deem that they may be eligible for. If a student is undocumented and can't complete the FAFSA, then they would go on the MHEC One app and they could complete the MHEC One app to replace the FAFSA because they're not eligible to complete the FAFSA. So if you're eligible to complete the FAFSA, you can't use the MHEC One app to replace the FAFSA. But if you're not eligible to complete the FAFSA, you can use the MHEC One app to apply for state aid, as well as you can not only use it to apply for state aid as a undocumented student, but you can apply for any other program that is eligible for undocumented students as well. So that's really the MHEC One app, where we're striving, pushing it for it to be a smart application, where it's based off what programs the student actually selects and questions related directly to those programs. So it won't ask every question throughout the application. It's more so based off what programs the student actually selects. If a program is not open, it will identify that the program's not open at that time. But the good thing about it is a student can go back in when the program is open and just resubmit the application, selecting that program, answering those additional questions. It does save the previous answered questions for the student.
Well, I know that we talk a lot about student loans because the center's focus has been on helping people with student loan debt. But as we do that, we're coming across people who are looking to complete the FAFSA for their children. So we've been fielding a lot of questions lately. One of them has to do with what are things going to look like next year. So I want to shift back to Ms. Cottom, and I know, you don't have a crystal ball, but based on this year and everything that you know that's going on, do you think that next year will be smoother or equally challenging, or just what are your thoughts on 25, 26?
Yes, if only I had a crystal ball. But I will say the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Education, Secretary Cardona, has been on record stating that they are targeting an October 1 launch date for the 25-26 FAFSA. So that's the goal. I am a little bit cautious, optimistically cautious about that, because we don't even have the corrections process fully implemented for the 24-25 award year yet. That's something that we would normally have been doing for 9 months yet, if things were, so we don't even have that fully implemented. So I am concerned about the functionality, because we have to remember that the FAFSA isn't just, we're thinking the application, we're thinking students put in the FAFSA, they're done, we're good. And so when we think about it as a process, and that's the first step, I am wanting and hoping and praying that all of the other steps are fully functional, and so that we can give students that information at an early age. So schools aren't trying to do things at the last minute, or trying to update systems or do all of these workarounds. Schools have had to do so many workarounds to provide students and families information, because that's what they want to do. They want to be able to provide the best information, the resources, let students know what they can expect. And so I just hope that next year, the intent of FAFSA simplification, what it was truly intended to do, we will see that come to fruition. And I am excited to see that come to fruition. But in the meantime, I am cautious, and I want us to remember that it's a process. So even if it is October 1, the FAFSA, students can complete the FAFSA. My next question would be, when are schools receiving that information? Is that fully functional? Is that up to date? Are the tables correct? All of that information that goes into the FAFSA.
Okay, so 10-1, fingers crossed.
Yes.
My next question is for campus-based professionals who are working to support students and their families during this time of so many changes. Are there any resources or tools that you have at NASFAA that you could share with our audience?
Yes, definitely. We have our FAFSA Simplification Web Center. And what I'll do, I'll put that in the chat. It's basically a web center that we created to keep members in the financial aid community updated on pertinent news related to FAFSA simplification updates. So it was everything from webinars. We've had so many webinars this year about training, what's changed. Mr. Dorsett mentioned some of the changes in the FAFSA, just information that's no longer included, what what you should know about that. We had a FAFSA key dates timeline that explains and goes through every single date. For example, the department said the FAFSA would be available, the delays, how that impacted the institutional records, like I mentioned, and also when families could fully complete the FAFSA. Also, we had things like the FAFSA simplification brief for campus partners. We can't do this without our campus partners. And so we created a brief to allow them to explain to their administration and other campus professionals, this is what's happening. Because sometimes people think financial aid and they're like, that's complicated. We let those folks do that over there. And so they may not be as aware of the in and out. They might have thought, okay, I heard that the FAFSA was available in January, we should be okay. But that wasn't the case. So we provided resources like that. And so that's always updated. We keep putting more and more information out there. So that's a great resource. And that's a place where everything is housed. We also, if there's any updates from the Department of Education, their resources and training tools, we will list that on the FAFSA Simplification Web Center. So it's just one place that has all the information that you may need if you want a history about FAFSA simplification, analysis about the bills. So that's a great place to start.
Thank you. I'm so glad that you brought up some of the misconceptions about the FAFSA, that it's a one and done kind of thing, or that it's just as easy as a student completing it and then everything else kind of just falls into place. So I wanted to ask Mr. Dorsett, at the state level, we know that you use the information from the FAFSA to assess eligibility for state awards. And you receive a lot of inquiries, I'm sure, because you're working with millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to go to state residents. So can you share with us some of the most common queries that your office receives from students and families, basically as a way that our community of campus-based professionals who aren't always in financial aid can perhaps answer a basic question, refer someone to a resource, or truly direct someone to financial aid because that's where the answer lies?
Sure. Our first question is, what kind of awards do you have? Am I eligible? And key thing right there is we push to do a great job on our website providing information, and I provided our website on there for students to understand what programs that we have. And that's the first part, because the more that you have that knowledge of what programs, then when you call, you have more specific questions, right? The idea of it is to be or have as much as specific of what you're trying to find out allows our representatives to help you more and understand what you're looking for. So, that's one of the biggest pushes. Other questions will be, am I eligible? When am I going to be awarded? Well, the other piece is that MD-CAPS account. Which we're striving to make it better for students in the way their portals look, but students looking at that to confirm that we received their FAFSA. Students going on studentaid.gov and confirming that the federal government actually processed their FAFSA. One of the things that we didn't mention right now is for students who have completed their FAFSA And it's not always one and done because sometimes we don't receive the record or the record has been rejected. So unfortunately, we have a lot of students that are saying, well, the school received my FAFSA, but you don't have it. And we're looking for it, but we can't find it. The federal government currently does not have a way for us to request students' records that have been processed. So in the past, you would go in the central processing system, identify the student's information, request a record, then you can get that specific record sent to you because you requested it. Right now, there is no way for that. So our students are saying, hey, where's my FAFSA? Or did you receive it? And we're looking for it, and we say we don't have a record of it. There's no way for us to get it. And as we've contacted the federal government, they don't know when that process is going to become available. So, just pushing that students understand that we are doing our best for them, right? We don't want to hold any money from them. We don't keep the money ourselves. Our push is to get them the money to allow them to focus on their education and fulfill their dreams and become part of this society. Um, so that patience is key, getting the knowledge. Other questions that are more detailed, that's what we're here for. The biggest push really is just educating the student on what programs we really have, creating an MD-CAPS account, making sure that they're looking at their emails, being aware, and then, students need resources and support. So definitely them filling out a FERPA form so that someone can contact us representing them and get that additional information that they may need to support them or help them understand.
Well, I'm glad that we are on brand with you. The message that we have been sharing with students and families is please be patient because this is a new process meant to be more simple, more accessible at the end, but with a few twists and turns along the way. The other thing that I wanted to highlight, Mr. Dorsett, was your mention of studentaid.gov. Many times students will go directly to the school before the federal aid process has worked out, and we see the same thing with student loans. So studentaid.gov, for those of you who are not in financial aid, is the online home of the Department of Education's Office of Federal Student Aid. It's also the place where students will complete their FAFSA. It's a place where students can review the history of any federal student loan that they've ever borrowed. So studentaid.gov is a place that every student needs to be familiar with. I do want to acknowledge some people who have left some comments in the chat. I see Dean Taylor from University of Maryland, Baltimore School of Social Work, as well as Patrick Ziegler from Ernest. And thank you so much to Alexia Simmons of MHEC for dropping those links in the chat. She shared with us a NASFAA resource on FAFSA simplification. And Mr. Dorsett, I see that you have dropped MHEC's website into the chat as well. So I want to thank you all so much for joining us. I know we could probably have a separate symposium on the FAFSA and take up the whole day instead of just half a day, but you have given us a great overview of how federal student aid affects state aid and some tips that students and families can use to make sure that they are maximizing the benefits at both levels. So thank you so much for being with us today. For those of you all who would like to keep up with NASFAA, they are at NASFAA on social media, and MHEC is at MD-MHEC. One quick reminder about another program that MHEC administers, and that is the Maryland Student Loan Debt Relief Tax Credit. The application is now available online through the state's one-stop website, but you can get to that link from MHEC's website. So at this time, it's just about 10 a.m. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll return in 3 minutes with our next general session, which is the Road to Zero, creating a pathway to financial wellness from Prince George's County to Baltimore City. We'll be right back.